Hey everyone, and welcome back to the video game series, where I'll be trying to make items from video games in real life only using scrap parts that I have in my workshop. In case you missed the first episode where we did the video game Raft, consider checking that one out before this one. In this video, we're going to be doing another game that I have put a lot of time into, and that game is Rust. In this game, you start with almost nothing. You wake up with just a rock and a torch, and from here you have to make new tools, weapons, and armor to protect yourself from other players and from hazards in the environment. Considering that you're probably going to be doing a lot of fighting, it's a good idea to make some armor. Now, very early on in the game, you're not going to have access to a lot of metal, so the easiest option to make some early game armor is wood. So I'll be focusing on making the wood breastplate first. From what you can see here, it looks like the armor is made up of several different pieces connected with rope. So trying to follow this design as accurately as possible, I started making the individual pieces on my workbench, using both tape, rope, and pieces of scrap wood, trying to make it look as accurate as I could to the game. The tape was surprisingly useful for making the individual pieces. It allowed me to bend the pieces into unique shapes, at which point I could use the rope to keep them in that position. This helped me make all of the unique curves so the armor would fit around my body. After I had made all the individual pieces, I started connecting them together, testing bit by bit to make sure it all fit. And at the end of the process, I was left with one fully connected piece of wood armor. It looks very, very silly, but I am now wearing my wooden armor chestplate. Now, considering the very salvaged nature of this chestplate, it's not going to be the best possible source of armor, but it will get you through the early game to start gathering some more resources. And one of the things you really need to gather resources, especially more wood, is an axe, and more specifically, the Salvaged Axe. Now, this axe is the second tier, so it's a little bit better than the basic one you can craft, and a lot better than the rock that you start with in the very beginning of the game. If we take a closer look here, we can see that there's a leather wrap around the lower wooden handle, which then connects to the upper metal part of the handle with two bolts going through it. The head of the axe seems to be made of a brake disc, which is connected to the body using various metal scraps. Because I didn't have a metal pipe that would work nicely for the handle, I decided to make the entire thing out of wood. I drilled holes through pieces cut off of lawnmowers to connect the head of the axe to the body. The head ended up being two discs I repurposed from a rowing machine. I then cut a chunk out of the back of these discs and grinded down the paint to make it look more similar to the one in the game. To finish off, I made a simple handle using some old ratchet straps. And here is the finished Salvaged Axe. Overall, I'm happy with how the axe has turned out, and I think it would even work in real life. But if you're interested in seeing how all of these things work, stay tuned for the YouTube short that comes out a week and a half after this video is released. Well, now that we have protection and a way to gather resources, we need something that you'll need in real life just as much as you will in the game, and that's a source of food and water. Now, both of these resources are not going to be the easiest to find in the world, but the more pressing is almost certainly going to be water. So let's focus on a way that we can actually gather water in the game, and one of those ways is collecting rain. So we're going to be building a small rain collector to actually collect this rain and round off our list with our third item. The rain catcher is pretty simple, just using an oil barrel, a tarp, and some metal scrap. So I quickly got to work cutting the top off of my oil barrel, which I had previously used in the raft video to make a grill. After cutting off the top and rejoining the two separated halves, I started finding metal pieces that I could use to make the scaffolding to hold up the tarp. I didn't have as many metal pieces as I thought, so I went for a 3-pronged design instead of a 4-pronged design. As the scaffolding started getting taller and taller, I used chains to provide a second bit of support for the tarp. And right after this clip here is when things unfortunately took a turn for the worse. As I was moving stuff in and out of my workshop space, I nudged my camera tripod, which caused one of the legs to collapse and caused the camera to fall face first onto the lens. And unfortunately, this completely destroyed the lens I was filming this video with. So some of the clips after this one might be a little bit out of focus and not quite right because I was using a lens I've never used before to finish the rest of the filming. But let me just say that even if the projects in the videos are very, very cheap to make, it doesn't necessarily mean the video is going to be cheap to make, especially if I'm breaking my own equipment. So consider subscribing to my Patreon to help support the channel and help me recover from a mistake like this. At this point, all I had to do was align the tarp with the scaffolding I'd built to make sure that it would funnel rain down into the middle of the barrel. And after everything was lined up nicely, I had finished off the small rain catcher. And here it is, the finished small water catcher. Now, this thing is anything but small, but it definitely would catch water using the huge surface area of this tarp. Just like the last video game episode, I'll be testing all 3 of these items in the short, so stay tuned for that to see if they actually work the same way they do in-game. But I hope you enjoyed this deep dive into items from Rust, and I really look forward to seeing you in the next video.